Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. Into the Afroverse is where we're taking Black folks into the future. You know, on a show like this, it really excites me to see people that grow in their passions, grow in their accomplishments, and kind of watching them get bigger and bigger, for lack of a better term. And today's guest embodies that. Karama Horne, also known as the Blurred Girl, is a Brooklyn, New York based culture journalist. That's one for Brooklyn. I'm also from New York, so I'm excited to see fellow Brooklynites succeed. She's a writer, a podcaster, host, and critic parked at the intersection of geekdom and diversity. Karama has hosted red carpets, live streams, comic conventions, and panels from New York to San Diego, and was featured in USA Today, the New York Times, the Guardian, the San Francisco Chronicle, and The Root. She has bylines at Marvel, Rotten Tomatoes, The Nerdist, Mashable, Sci-Fi, Wire, and The Wrap. That's a lot. Okay. She is also the founder of the Blurred Girl brand and website and co-host of the Pop Paranormal Horror podcast on the Travel Channel. And her novel, set in the world of the Black Panther universe, Protectors of Wakanda, a history and training manual for the Dora Milaje, is out now and it's available wherever books are sold. And with that, I'd like to welcome the Blurred Girl. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? I was like, wow, he really is going to read all that. Thank you. Thank
No,
you
like I
so much.
said,
I appreciate it.
no, of course. Thank you. I just want to, shout out folks' accomplishments. And like I said, for me, I just want to thank you for being part of this. Because like I said, I have seen you grow. I have seen your vision come to fruition. And I'm just really happy that you decided to come on board and join us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I have been watching AFN's growth for a long time now, too. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to get right to it. You know, for myself, when I was growing up, I always loved comic books. But one of the things when I was coming up, I didn't see too many young ladies involved in that world. Now, of course, today, I see it all the time. Folks like yourself, I see it at conventions and so forth. But for you, what is it that got you started on this journey?
It's really funny when I hear a lot of folks say that. I come from a geek family. Like I
Mhm.
didn't know being a geek was strange. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, so I was cute. I was too busy being the only black girl to realize that being a geek was weird. Um,
Right.
Also, I knew a lot of not growing up. I didn't know a lot of black geeks in general, but
Mhm.
I think by the time I got to college, I I've always seemed to be around other sisters who were into stuff like this. And I think
Mhm.
we generally have the same reaction when most people like, I didn't see any sisters who were into what I was into. Y'all did, but you weren't checking for us. We weren't who, because being a geek wasn't like a hugely popular thing like it is now. Like
Right.
we didn't have no Megan the Stallions and stuff growing up,
Right.
so it really wasn't that we weren't there. It's like we were reading the same thing a lot of the other geeks were doing, but we were also introverts and nerdy and keep it to ourselves. So we've always been there. It's just no one really saw us. And in my household though, I grew up watching Star Wars, Star Trek, you know, uh, Stargate, anything with Star on it, we watched.
Right.
But like I remember Star Trek being sort of required viewing because all the reruns and everything. And I remember my dad being like, listen, because of Uhura, I think Uhura basically she definitely had a really powerful effect on me because not only she was a black woman, she was the only black woman in the room, and she was in the back just listening to everything. And I felt like that was like my whole childhood. Like I was always the only one in the room and I was in the back listening to everything. Figuring out how to, what moves to make. So, but yeah, I mean, I joke that I think we were the only family that I knew that had a Crunchyroll account, like a family account, because my mother would watch like Korean dramas and Asian dramas, and my brothers would watch anime. And honestly, I was into animation and anime before I was into comics. And it's simply because we didn't live near a comic book shop.
Right.
And I, even though I live in Brooklyn now, I grew up in Jersey. So we were like, it was kind of isolating for me. I just made sure after I graduated from college to get as close to Black people as possible because growing up, it was the opposite. So yeah, and my brothers were always not just playing video games, but like taking apart the consoles and jury rigging them up themselves. I joke around a lot with people who talk about like this explosion of Black folks interested in anime. I actually that was my interview with The Guardian I did, where I was like, we've been doing it, like, but we were getting DVDs and stuff like that and cracking them so they'd be region free so we could watch them. Like, no, there was not a lot of people translating stuff then, but then you started on, when stuff ended up online, you had people who were doing, fan subs and stuff. And that was, shout out to the fan subs that let us know what we thought we were seeing on Dragon Ball Z was wrong. So, but yeah, it was just my whole family is kind of geeky. So I didn't know that part was strange until I got to college and nobody understood what I was talking about.
Wow. And I grew up the same way. I mean, the animation piece was strong. And I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but I was watching anime on the UHF channels. And I'm sure there's only a handful of folks out there that might be listening that know what I'm talking about.
Did you have to hold up the antenna?
Yes, I did. So I'm talking, Speed Racer, Cyborg 009. So yeah, I mean, I was seeking out those channels, and I saw, like you said, the anime was strong in the community because, graffiti artists would oftentimes incorporate anime characters or that anime likeness into their work. So that was something, that was pretty prevalent. But like you said, a lot of people kind of underestimated what was going on in the Black community as related to those forms of entertainment. Now, for yourself, you've taken on the handle Blurred Girl. There are a lot of folks out there that are still not clear on what the word blurred means. Would you like to explain that and also explain how you came up with the name Blurred Girl for yourself?
The funny thing about it is I think it has now evolved to something different than what it was. Like when I was first calling myself Blurred, I don't know, 2015, 2014, something like that. There weren't that many of us calling ourselves nerds. And basically Blurred just simply means Black nerd.
Right.
But if you saw somebody in the comment section or a message board or something, and you called yourself a Blurred, specifically on Tumblr, you would know it was sort of like a handle that meant, oh, okay, this is somebody that likes comics, likes anime, likes science fiction, or even science, is into science, is into technology, is into, Afrofuturism. Right. So it was sort of a call sign. So if somebody saw your name, you would know that, okay, this is somebody I could probably vibe with. I think it has evolved into I'm not crazy about what it's evolved into now. Like there are people that call themselves blurs that are very cliquish that don't want, like, I know more about comics than you do. You're not allowed in. And I think what's really funny is we were always on the outside, and that's why we were giving ourselves this call sign so we could find each other. So I don't subscribe to any blur that sits up and says, like, I know more than you. I am very gatekeepy. Just the Blurred Girl as a whole, me, my brand, I don't have any tolerance for that. Like wherever you lie in your geekdom, wherever you're starting out or wherever you are, in your geek journey, you are welcome, because there's tons that you can learn and discuss and find from other people. Because think about how many times you've had conversations with people and went, wait, I didn't know that that director also did that anime, or I didn't know that writer also did that comic. Wait a minute. What else did they do? And then you learn and you run off and you find other stuff to read or watch. And, the gatekeeping us is just, I'm not a fan of that. But so I tell people, it's funny, there are not that many of us. And I think when I run into people now who say, well, I'm not going to call myself a blerd, I don't find it necessary to, differentiate myself or call myself a Black nerd. And I go, okay, you're welcome. That means we've evolved. And that means, but it means something to me. And I also tell other people, call yourself whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I just want to talk about this show or this movie. So I tell people I am the blerd girl, but you can be whatever you want. You can call yourself whatever you want, as long as you don't call me out my name, but
I hear that.
but I tell, I think it, like I said, it's evolved, and movies like Black Panther, shows like Luke Cage and, Black Lightning have shown that there is an audience. But the funny thing about it is we like a lot of different stuff. And I think we're still working on the intersectionality of our fandoms.
I hear you. So you talked about, the term, the name, blerd girl. In your response, you also mentioned Afrofuturism. And here on Into the Afroverse, that's our angle, taking Black folks into the future. What does that term mean to you, and how have you incorporated it into your work?
Whenever I think of Afrofuturism, I always go back to Ytasha Womack's definition, the Afrofuturism writer and culture. I just think she's just such an incredible, she's got incredible knowledge of the genre. But her definition is that it's an intersection of imagination, technology, the future, and liberation of Black people. And I love that. And I also think that and the other reason why I like that is it's not saying that it's just a book. It's not saying it's a movie. It's not saying it's animation. It's saying it's an intersection of concepts, art, science, technology. So no matter what medium you are basically being introduced to, when you first see Afrofuturism, it still falls under those categories. I think for me, I probably was most affected by books, speculative lit first. I think a lot of people like myself were very affected by Octavia Butler. And I until I knew more, I think I said that Octavia Butler was the mother of modern day Afrofuturism. But now that I have expanded my knowledge of the genre, I think she's really the daughter of it, because Sam Delaney taught her, and Sam Delaney, I think, is the father. And there's a lot. If there's anybody out there that is just trying to figure out where to start on their journey, I also think Cherie Renee Thomas is a brilliant resource, and her book Dark Matter should be required reading. But I also think that because the term was created, I don't remember the name of the guy who created it, but he's a white scholar and culture anthropologist, I believe. And so I think most discussions of Afrofuturism were really very academic. And they still are to a certain extent. But what I love about the fact that we have other artists embracing it, going back to Missy Elliott and coming forward to Janelle Monáe, and these are all women creators, but of course, I'm not going to rule out, Sun Ra, Africa Mabata, and all the other people who were using the same type of concepts back in the day. I mean, you can even look at Bootsy Collins and see shades of it. But I think I love what Gen Z is doing with Afrofuturism in terms of music and the fusion of music and art and technology, because I feel like technology is kind of caught up with our imaginations. And now we have music like nerdcore and what MF Doom created, may rest in peace. And there's a lot that Afrofuturism has now seeped into the mainstream zeitgeist. And so you see glimpses of it,
Yes.
but or shades of it, but it's not the original, you know?
Right. Right.
And it's like the difference between seeing an interpretation of Basquiat and an actual Basquiat. You know what I mean?
I got you. I got you. If you're just joining us, this is Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. And today we are joined by Karama Horne, the Blurred Girl. And we're talking all kind of geek stuff and blurred stuff and Afrofuturistic works here. So could you speak a little bit more of what moved you in terms of, like I mentioned earlier when I introduced you, I witnessed your growth. For folks that are out there listening that are interested in doing similar things in terms of their passions, how did you grow this? How does this move from, your passion, your interest to where you are today? How are you able to grow it?
I basically started like a Tumblr back in 2013, 2014. And what I was doing was yelling all about the stuff that I was into, the comics, the animation, as well as the Black characters and Black creators that were creating a lot of the work that we were seeing that people didn't know about. I think back then there was a lot of talk about Miles Morales, and Brian Michael Bendis, of course, created that character. And there was sort of an outcry saying, hey, where are the other Black comic book characters? Where are the Black creators? And I really was starting to dig into, wait, they're here. They already exist. Let me introduce you to Milestone. Let me introduce you to, Monica Rambeau, Black Panther, things like that. And I guess it's just sort of timing. A lot of people, like you said, hadn't seen a sister talking about this stuff. So right. I gained a lot of followers pretty early on Tumblr. And then some of the work that I wrote went viral. And I decided to make a proper website, go over to WordPress. But it was still a blog. I was still editing full time. And this was sort of my passion, my hobby. And I think the thing that I did very early on was I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with the Blur Girl at first. But I've always been like that, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, but very clear on what I did not want to do.
Right.
So, what I started to do was, because around this time, you really started seeing geek outlets sort of pop up. So you started seeing people writing about comic book characters. I remember seeing the death of Captain America being all over the news. And I thought that was interesting. Something geeky every now and then, and then when they killed off Superman, same thing. Like, whenever anything major happened in the comics, it would actually start to make the mainstream news. And so you started to see waves of things like that until outlets popped up and networks were popping up that were just covering geek content. And I was like, you know what? There might be a way to do this. So what I started to do was on my website or through the Blur Girl, basically start using it as a place to hone my craft. So I would have written interviews. I would go to conventions and do recorded interviews. I would put them on my podcast. I would transcribe them and turn them into articles, things like that. And then I would start it, with my video editing background. It's really hard to edit for yourself when you do that. But I started recording a lot of those interviews, working with like students and stuff like that to help record me at events, because the iPhone was not as good as it is now then. And that led to me being able to create the YouTube channel and a little bit of a reel, so that in 2017, my hobby and my real, I don't want to say my real life, my real job, because I was still an independent contractor, but my editing world and my hobby world collided when I was asked by a company to subcontract on a project with Sci-Fi Wire, and it required me to do editing at San Diego Comic-Con. So they were like, do you know anything about comics? And I was like, have you met me? Like, so that sort of was the beginning of my journey, because when I got there, I shouldn't say the beginning, I should say the middle, because when I got there, I kind of was a So I was an editor, but I also got to do a little producing. They asked me to pitch some shows. I pitched a couple of small shows that were on Sci-Fi, and they were literally like geek news breaks, things like that. It wasn't like a full-on show, but
Right.
I had a credit, and it kind of blossomed from there. I was asked to be on the Sci-Fi Wire podcast. I was doing live events with them, interviewing comic book creators on stage, everyone from, Chris Claremont to the cast of Black Lightning, people who I just been talking about. And it was funny because at every step of the way, they were like, "Oh, so I didn't know you did this. I didn't know you produced. I didn't know you write. I didn't know." And these were all things that I was already doing for my blog.
Right.
So I tell everybody, like, don't wait to be picked. Just start doing it and honing your craft and start making your reel look as professional as possible, because influencers are now being used to, cover this type of content.
Right.
And I really blurred the line between, because some people think I'm an influencer and some people think I'm a journalist. The truth is I'm both.
Mhm.
But I absolutely positively would not have gotten the access that I have gotten through major outlets if I also didn't have the Blurred Girl,
Gotcha.
because people just weren't checking for a sister on a red carpet or anything back then, not before Black Panther.
Right.
And so, I have a non-traditional, even though when I went to Northwestern, I did study TV and film production. I did study journalism. I didn't come up through traditional journalism channels, and my brand, the Blurred Girl, and what it represented, really blew up in 2018, because in January of 2018, we got Black Lightning. In February, we got the first Black Panther movie. Over the summer, I believe we got the second season of Luke Cage. And by the end of that year, we had Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So all of a sudden, everybody everywhere was looking for Black people who could be on camera, talk about geekdom, and, confidently and hold a conversation. So all of that practice just basically came to a head, I would say, in 2018. And then I've just sort of kind of launched after that. And I guess the Blurred Girl launched sort of into the stratosphere after that. And then I started being asked to write things creatively.
I see. And how can folks find you on different social media platforms and such? How can they find you?
You can find me. I'm the Blurred Girl everywhere. TheBlerdGurl. You can go to blurredgirl.com, but I'm also on Twitter. I don't know for how much longer. Instagram and TikTok. Those are the three places you can really find me.
Excellent. And as I always say on this show, when I have such interesting guests and so forth with such a great story, the time moves rather quickly. So we're actually coming up in a few minutes, to the end. But I do want to talk about, and I also want to invite you back, because I really want the listeners to hear about your latest book, and also give you an opportunity to talk about your book. Can you tell us about your book, please?
Sure. My book is called Black Panther Protectors of Wakanda, A History and Training Manual of the Dora Milaje. No, that was not my original title. But I was actually asked by Marvel to write this book, and it is the origin story of the Dora Milaje. Those are the beautiful Black women warriors that roll with the Black Panther. And it is all about how they become Dora, what their training is like, what their fighting styles are like. And also, I got to write a history of all 16 of the Black Panthers that are in the comics, which I was thrilled to be able to do.
Excellent. For the listeners out there, does the book tie in more with the film series or with the comic book series?
The book is definitely a tie-in to the comic books, but you don't have to have read the comics to understand the book. And I think Ryan Coogler did a very good job in the first movie of tying in comics that were already in existence. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Christopher Priest, who happened to create the Dora Milaje originally, as well as a little of Roxane Gay's work and things like that. So even though my book really only refers to the comics, that only affects a couple of characters. Most of it is pretty familiar.
Excellent. And finally, what advice can you offer other people looking to get into, this line of work, to do what you do? Because like you said, there's so many folks out there that are passionate about this and looking for ways to share that passion with other people and, make a living at it. So what advice would you offer?
Diversify. And there's a lot of people who say they want to write for, and just so I'm clear, my book is not a comic book. It's a prose novel. It's a YA novel. So if you want to write, if you want to do, comics, do comics, create your own independent stuff as well. That will still get you work in mainstream channels and things like that. But it doesn't mean if you work on a mainstream book that you can't work independently. And I think that's a thing that people get kind of confused. They're like, no, I'm only going to be indie. I'm never going to work for a major corporation. It's like, okay, that's fine. But the major corporation, one project might put you on the map so that you get the money to do the independent stuff. So I think it's about diversifying what and your creativity.
Gotcha.
Learning more about all aspects of your art.
Excellent. And what's up next for you? I know the book is just out now, so you're still promoting it and talking about it. But is there anything that's coming up next? Any spoilers that you want to give us in terms of any upcoming projects for yourself?
Well, I have a project that I can't talk about that's going to drop at the top of the year that I'm very, very excited about. It's a little project I'm working on with PBS. And I have, obviously, I'm all about, talking about the book right now. It's only been about a month, but I'm trying to get a deluxe edition so I can include even more artists and more work in the project. I was very happy to get Aletha Martinez and Sheba Maya, as well as Ashley A. Woods, to do some work on it, but I didn't have control over all the artists. And I, of course, am still co-hosting Pop Paranormal. It's a horror podcast over on Travel Channel. And I'm super excited about that. So I'm hoping we get a second season.
Excellent. Well, once again, congratulations to you and all of your success. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. So
thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So once again, this is Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones, here on WOL 1450 AM, 95.9 FM, where information is power. And you can also join us on WOLDCnews.com. So thank you. Have a good day. That's Into the Afroverse, and a special shout out to Mr. Duke Productions for producing today's episode. Thanks. Take care.